Welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we are going to talk about parables. Specifically, we're going to focus on Zen parables. In class, we've been talking about the parables of the kingdom, which are specifically Christian parables. But it's interesting to note that both Jesus and the Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama, who founded, I would say, or influenced Buddhism, which then led to the development of Zen Buddhism, all of these philosophies, religions, beliefs use parables as didactic tools, as ways to teach complex messages through the use of stories. And so what we're going to be focusing on is how or why parables are effective rhetorical modes. How do they work for the audiences that they're geared toward, and why are they effective even thousands of years after the deaths of those who were teaching them in the first place? And we're also going to focus on how they're different from allegories. Many people will say that Christian parables are allegories, and some will argue that they're parables, and they'll say the same thing about Buddhist teachings, that they're allegories and not parables. It's going to be important for us to understand why it is that they're considered parables, how people are making the argument that they're allegories, and that will give us a way to be able to deduce or draw as a logical conclusion one, if it's a parable, or multiple interpretations if it's an allegory. So in order to be able to do this, we're going to need to take a look at each parable in a rhetorical manner. We're going to need to connect the message, or the logos, with the identity of the speaker, or the ethos, and the audience's emotional needs, or the pathos. Right, so we're going to need to try to connect these three things. So it's going to be really important to try to understand what these things are saying, who these people are that are teaching them, and finally what the people are, or what the people need who are listening to these stories. So as we go through these three Zen parables, I want you to think about these comprehension questions, as well as how these strategies of connecting logos, ethos, and pathos allow for a deeper understanding of these teachings. So consider, as we're reading, that many parables end with a moral explicitly stated. So what are the specific lessons that we are asked to think about, that are appended to or attached to the parables? Are there more than one? Right? Are these technically allegories? Or is it just one simple, straightforward message? Is it possible to deduce, or to draw as a logical conclusion, more than one lesson per parable? And it seems kind of like a nonsensical question, because by its very definition, a parable is a simple story that teaches a moral or a lesson. A moral or a lesson. So it doesn't seem like this is a question that maybe makes sense grammatically. So it might be helpful to think, are these parables, or are these allegories? If they're parable, what is this? If they're parables, what is the single message that we can deduce from them? If they're allegories, what are the multiple messages that we can deduce from them? And then finally, you've been asked to write your own narrative parable, right? So consider, a parable is a simple, straightforward story meant to teach a moral or a lesson. How will you write your own narrative that answers this question? Okay. So we're going to look at three Zen parables today. We're going to look at learning to be silent. We're going to look at a muddy road, and then we're going to look at perhaps one of the most famous Zen parables, which is variously known as the tiger and the strawberry, or the two mice. It depends on who's telling the story. But it's important also to understand a little bit about Zen and Zen Buddhism. I think I am hardly qualified to talk about the history of Zen. There are a number of incredible teachers, and so I would highly recommend a very interesting lecturer who was popular throughout the 1950s, 60s, 70s, named Alan Watts. Brilliant lecturer, able to connect Christianity and the West with Buddhism and Zen Buddhism specifically. One of the things that Alan Watts says is Zen is a method for expanding the ego, growing your sense of yourself in order to make it ridiculous and therefore destroy the concept entirely. This is a hard concept to wrap your mind around, but if you think about it like this, the audience that is going to learn Zen are novitiate monks. Monks who are seeking enlightenment. When they seek enlightenment, they are told, I have nothing to teach you, by these enlightened Zen monks. I have nothing to teach you. I have nothing to teach you. Go away. Get off of my doorstep. Why are you here? And so these novitiate monks have to bow and pray and meditate for days on end, and thus assume the role, truly embody the role of the Zen novitiate monk. And so after days and days of pious, heavy meditation and begging to enter the monastery, they may meet with this master. Now, the master, this speaker, is truly like sensei. It's very high-ranking, very important member of this community. And part of their role is to not only confuse, but also to drive the spontaneity of the novitiate in order to eventually shatter their sense of self. That's why there are certain stories of monks who are raking the sand pits. Right? I'm sure you've seen those with the big rakes, and they rake, or sometimes there's calligraphy, right? And suddenly they'll strike a rock or they'll make a symbol and they snap into enlightenment. So there's a tension in Buddhism about both expanding the sense of one's ego consciousness, the sense of I, me, in order to eventually cut that in half. So so as we're looking at these three Zen parables, I want you to try to think about if they're accomplishing that. If they're not trying to work toward that, what are they working toward? What is the moral? What's the parable here? And why are these parables effective at teaching whatever it is they're teaching? Because regardless of what you may think about them, they've been around for almost 1,000 years. Zen really caught on in Japan in around the 1190s. So it can be no doubt that they're influential stories. How is it that they function and work given this rhetorical situation? So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into them. We're going to look at a muddy road first. Tenzin and Ekido were once traveling together down a muddy road. A heavy rain was still falling. Coming around a bend, they met a lovely girl in a silk kimono and sash, unable to cross the intersection. "Come on, girl," said Tenzin at once. Lifting her in his arms, he carried her over the mud. Aikido did not speak again until that night when they reached a lodging temple. Then he no longer could restrain himself. "We monks don't go near females," he told Tenzin, "especially not young and lovely ones. It is dangerous. Why did you do that?" "I left the girl there," said Tenzin. "Are you still carrying her?" That was a muddy road. Next, we're going to look at the variously named tiger and strawberry, or the two mice. Buddha told a parable in a sutra. A man traveling across a field encountered a tiger. He fled, the tiger after him. Coming to a precipice, he caught hold of a root of a wild vine and swung himself down over the edge. The tiger sniffed at him from above. Trembling, the man looked down to where, far below, another tiger was waiting to eat him. Only the vine sustained him. Two mice, one white and one black, little by little, started to gnaw away the vine. The man saw a luscious strawberry near him. Grasping the vine with one hand, he plucked the strawberry with the other. How sweet it tasted. Our last parable, learning to be silent. 4 pupils of the 10-day school of Zen Buddhism promised one another to observe 7 days of silence. On the first day, all were silent. Their meditation had begun auspiciously. But when night came and the oil lamps were growing dim, one of the pupils could not help exclaiming to a servant, "Fix those lamps!" The second pupil was surprised to hear the first one talk. "We are not supposed to say a word," he remarked. "You two are stupid! Why did you talk?" asked the third. "Ha! I am the only one who has not talked," concluded the fourth. Okay. So, consider that many parables end with a moral explicitly stated. What morals or lessons are attached to the parables that we have here? Is it possible to deduce more than one lesson per parable? Finally, write your own parable. Write your own Buddhist parable, and from our discussions in class, write your own Christian parable. Thank you very much for your attention. Have a great day. Bye-bye.